Hello and welcome to Brit Sci-Fi from the National Space Centre. Today I am joined by an award-winning British icon, star of stage and screen, who many of you will know as Patsy from Absolutely Fabulous, Purdey from the new Avengers, and she's starred in films such as on Her Majesty's Secret Service, Trail of the Pink Panther, Shirley Valentine, and her voice is one of the most recognised in the UK. You will have seen her recently on your screens travelling the Nile, the Trans-Siberian Railway and across Japan, but for science fiction fans, she will always be Sapphire from Sapphire and Steel. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the lovely Joanna Lumley. Hello and welcome.
It's such a pleasure to be with you. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, I cannot thank you enough.
My special sapphire colouring today. You can see it goes into earrings. Oh. She's got that. She's got sapphire ring on today. So she's thinking sapphire today.
Fabulous. I always loved that about the episodes. Each episode you had a sapphire outfit and you had a particular hairstyle. They always had that sort of focus on making sure that she was a character in each episode. It was brilliant. Firstly, I'd like to personally thank you for your hard work. I mean, I know that you do a lot of work on behalf of charities and organisations, but certainly the one that stands out is the Gurkha Justice campaign. I used to run an event where we used to have an amazing guy who would turn up and collect, and every year people would drop some money in his collection bucket. The year that you made it your mission to get what was right for them was the year that people were route marching their husbands across to the collection pot and saying, right, put money in there, otherwise Joanna will have words. It was brilliant to see. So for using your power and influence on behalf of others, thank you so much. It's been fantastic. Is that something that you feel passionately about, or is that...
The proudest moments of my life. My father was a Gurkha, and I don't think any of us knew the horrors that were going on in our name. I mean, I think it was not deliberate, but I think it was government after government kicking it into the long grass, thinking this is an anomaly. Because, of course, Nepal, where the Gurkhas come from, is not part of the Commonwealth. So they weren't treated like Commonwealth soldiers. So at the end of their tour of duty, maybe 15, 20 years serving this country, and remember, they've served this country for 200 years with all kinds of bravery and laying down their lives and VCs and so on. They were deported like criminals. And so we thought this was completely wrong. And but people who'd fought for our country, died for our country, paid taxes to our country, should at least be allowed to have the chance to educate their children here and to stay here if they wanted to. So we fought that little battle, which was a huge battle. And thank goodness the public came behind us, not only the British public, but as you can imagine, troops from all across the world who'd served with the Gurkhas. It was one of the proudest moments of my life. I was just part of a team of 5 of us, but we promised the Gurkhas we wouldn't let go until we won, and thank goodness we did.
It was brilliant. It was a great moment when you stood there with the politician and said, we've made a decision, haven't we? So thank you for that. That was brilliant. I've gone off on a tangent. We're here to talk about Sapphire and Steel, and there have been hundreds of questions submitted for you in advance, and it really is an iconic show. So I'm going to kick off with a question straight away from the fans. So Craig on Facebook would like to know, I read that you didn't enjoy making Sapphire and Steel. Is this true? And if so, why? Or is it just a tabloid rumour?
I think that's the worst tabloid rumour I can think of, Craig. I adored making Sapphire and Steel. It was so groundbreaking. It was so all-engrossing. Remember, Sapphire and Steel were the main characters. The stories written by P.J. Hammond were so incredibly imaginative and scary and complicated, complex. David McCallum was the best co-star you could hope for. I absolutely loved it, so I'm afraid that's a little porky pie whipped up by somebody who was biting their nails, bored stiff and didn't know what to write.
It's like a TripAdvisor review. It's all lies. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, I mean, there were some great characters in the show. I always remember Led and his laugh. He was always really quite a frightening character, but helpful also.
Do you know, the whole thing about the show was that it was called a children's show, but there was something very frightening and scary about it. All the episodes had some profound truth or darkness in there. Remember, Sapphire and Steel had come to rid the world of dark and evil things. And the things that we encountered were very, very grim and dark. And I think a lot of children were left in front of the television to watch it, and their parents not knowing how scary school it was. I get taxi drivers now, middle-aged taxi drivers who go, turn around, they know it's me, and they go, I tell you what, that really scared. And I go, which one scared you the most? Which particular episode? Some of them hated the story where photographs of Victorian children little figures began to disappear from the photographs, and there was a man with no face. This is real stuff of absolute nightmares. And of course, there was the ghost of the soldier on the railway station, and there were the pieces of animals, because Sapphire could sense that animals were being killed and used in violent ways, maybe swans killed to stuff pillows and things like this. And although the special effects were very, nowadays, primitive, when you're watching a story, you don't really mind about that. It's like watching puppets. You don't see the strings after a bit. You just follow the story. And there was this great resentment of animals who came swarming back to try to fight through rivers of blood and things. I mean, it was spellbindingly scary and therefore fascinating to work on. And occasionally they would introduce characters like Lead, quite scary, like Silva, fantastic, rather dashing. But I loved the idea that we were assigned for particular projects and then we would be sent back. But Sapphire and Steel mostly centered here on this earth because there were so many things that were wrong that they could set right.
I totally agree with you. I mean, I know it was made as a children's series originally, but even that first episode where you have these two children whose parents disappear and then these complete strangers come into their house and this woman who has this ability to send the policeman away, a member of, the constabulary who you are taught to trust as a child. It was quite shocking for its time, I would imagine.
I think it really was. And all kinds of parts of it. Mind you, I think it's good for children to be scared. I know that's a horrible thing to say, but most fairy stories have got a really scary thing. They've got a witch who can eat you or burn you, or they've got some three-legged monster or three-toed beast that will claw you. I mean, quite a lot of children's stories are quite dark, and that's not a bad thing at all. But I sometimes wonder whether they shouldn't have programmed it slightly differently. Also, it was in 2 episodes a week, and they were rather weak about saying you can watch this on Tuesday and Thursday. And if you didn't know that and just watched on Tuesday, the stories were even more complex and hard to follow than normal. But I was proud of all of it. Sometimes the episodes were sometimes there were only 4 episodes for a story, sometimes 6. I think once we went to 8, I'm not sure, but there were mostly 6 or 4. Yeah, and all different. It was all different. There was no kind of similarity with any of the challenges they faced.
Yes, the railway story is across 8 episodes, and I can remember watching that one and I wanted to know what was happening. I wanted to know what was the darkness. So, yeah, it was always fascinating to know what that next episode would be. Yeah, great show. So Tamish and Ian on Facebook would both like to know, do you think Sapphire and Steel could return as a remake? And would you accept a role within it if offered? And if so, would it be Sapphire or would you choose a different role?
Could it be remade? Yes, I think it could and updated. It kind of was the forerunner of the X-Files in a funny way, if you think about it. People with out-of-this-world abilities. Sapphire could stop time. When her eyes went blue, she could reverse time or hold it. And the way that they did this, incidentally, was quite interesting because it was strange that her eyes could suddenly flash quite a vivid, I haven't got anything here, but maybe that's the nearest kind of blue color. Her eyes would flash. And how they did that was that I had blue contact lenses, which were pretty primitive because we're going back a long time now. So they weren't the easy ones you get now. They were pretty much plasticky contact lenses. In they went. Then they'd put in blue eye drops like ink, which would be absorbed into the contact lens. Then they would, sitting me in front of a screen, pull the color, that blue, out of my eyes and put in, on another camera, that pale blue, and then flash that in behind the holes that they'd left in my eyes. And they hadn't got something of the right color. They wanted it to look really different. So this is true. They used one of the overalls that the makeup girls were wearing, which was just the blue they wanted. And they spread it over a lectern and focused a camera on it. And then when Sapphire would say, Steel, I can see something. And I'd have to keep my eyes very still and very open, my head very unmoving. And flash, in would come the wardrobe, the makeup artist's overall. This is how movies are made. It's good fun.
Whoever said acting was glamorous as somebody holds your head and they drop things into your eyes? It sounds horrific. Right, so we've got another question. Beth on Facebook would like to know, is there a possibility that Sapphire and Steel managed to escape the cafe floating in space prison?
Do you know, Beth, I think, as far as I can remember, it was a petrol station. I know why you're thinking of a cafe, because it looked awfully like an Edward Hopper, the American artist, an Edward Hopper picture. It had that awful, empty, kind of lost feeling about it. Nobody coming, nobody going. And David and I absolutely hated the fact that we got stuck up there. We kept saying, can't we do just a couple of episodes to bring them out of that and maybe release them back before they can be reassigned to another planet? You can't just leave them there. But for some reason, ITV had run out of money, or, you know, the usual things. Everything happens that we never see as viewers. Machinations, politics behind the screen go on. And as far as I know, we're still stuck up there. And I tell you, it's really hard for me as a human being and grown up now to drive past an empty petrol station without feeling a slight shudder, thinking that if I ever drove into it and it was completely empty, I might be stuck there even now.
And was it because PJ became ill and wasn't able to write the next story that it happened? Because, I mean, I'm assuming that in the writer's mind, there could have been a next episode. There could have been a new mission for Sapphire and Steel.
That's right. I think it was never really explained. And PJ's illness, because he had a sort of breakdown, I think. He was a darling man, so full of, he was rather like Douglas Adams, you know, he was a dreamer. He was a sort of foreteller of all kinds of things and a really fine storyteller and writer. But I think he sort of boiled over and got too much. And rather than try to limp on with something that wasn't his, and maybe he had a contract which said that the episodes could only be written by him. I don't know what it was. But anyway, we were suddenly stuck, or we were suddenly cut off. And it troubled us both greatly. I think it might be rather lovely to remake it, you know, going back to the earlier question. And would I accept a part in it? Of course I would. I'd love David still to be doing it, because he, although older than me, is still working away like mad, still as handsome as ever, with his Ilya Kuryakin blonde hair flicked back and his marvellous hawk-like nose and his great eyes. I think Sapphire would always have to be pretty much younger than I am. So I could be somebody a little bit advanced in years. I'd like to be one of the a great sort of sage of the ages, you know, still wearing blue, I think. Maybe the blue's faded a bit. Maybe she's turned into her turquoise. Maybe I'll come on in a turquoise makeup artist overall.
And you need an owl. You need a sort of a clockwork owl there to, you know, so you are that the muse of the intellect, or, you know, I think that'd be brilliant.
It would be lovely.
Yeah, I'm not very good at Greek mythology. I can't remember all of the characters, but I'm sure that there would be.
Athena, who was the wise one with the owl. Yes.
Yes, there we go. That's fantastic. Yes, so we've got another question. Colin on Facebook would like to know, I will never forget the railway station episodes of Sapphire and Steel. I'm not sure my parents realised it would be that frightening for an 11-year-old boy. Do you have a favourite episode, and have you watched any of them since making the show?
Colin, I loved that episode too. It was so beautifully told, and it was so relatable, because although all of us were born, I mean, I was born after the Second World War, and this was the First World War. And the bitterness that that young soldier felt because he was killed after armistice had been announced. So the armistice was announced on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. And he was killed by a sniper's bullet just after that. And his ghost was restless. It could not disappear into paradise. It kept coming back because he'd left behind the girl he loved, who had been the village schoolmistress. And he would come back in his puttees wrapped around and his soldier's uniform and his knapsack on his back, pacing to come and see if she was still there. And Sapphire turned into her with a little straw hat and a long skirt to try to entice him, because we were trying to entice him as a ghost to cross over into the beyond where he could rest in peace. And I found there was something so profoundly moving about that story of absolute uselessness. He needn't have been killed. That was the point of it. He shouldn't have been killed, and he couldn't get over it. But bitterness is a bad thing. And part of that story was awful too, because the old ghost hunter we found and persuaded to take the boy with him, he had to give up his own life as well. this was dark stuff. How did they ever think it was right for children? Anyway, Colin, I loved that episode very much indeed. And I'm sorry, your parents were quite right. It was too scary for a little one. It was too scary. But I'd love to see it again. Do I sit and watch them again? I wish I did, but for ages I had them on homemade taped. My father used to rather sweetly tape things. I was on television, videotape them. And I had a whole box of those tapes before they came out on CDs, DVDs. And I thought, oh, one day I'll watch them. But of course, then videotapes went out. That's all I had. I think I've now got a box set somewhere, I'm not sure. But I haven't watched them again. I thought of trying to show them to my granddaughters. But then I thought things have moved on and children now are so expecting fast stuff. And I know that it was slow and it was different. And I didn't want them to look at it and go, oh, Granny's in something ghastly. So I haven't seen it again. No.
Yeah, I think it was all of the stories in I mean, I know what you're saying about dying after the 11th day, that armistice, and the resentment, which is what the darkness wanted, but also the chaps that were working as private individuals in the submarine, and that they resented, and Tully, who lost 5 years of his life, and it was a very dark show. Exactly the same as you. I have them on VHS. I've got a double box set, so it's this big plastic chunky box. And so, yes, I can't watch them on that, but I do have them on DVD as well. And I know what you mean about that fast pace. I tried to sit down and show some young children some very early Anderson, the sort of super marionation work. And because at the time it was so groundbreaking, they would spend 5 minutes moving a truck, and then the crane would come down and take this thing and put it into this ship. And by about 30 seconds in, the children I was trying to show it to were bored, because that's it, everything now is so much faster paced. So I think it could be difficult.
I think it's difficult. What I might do is go back and look at them on my own, just to remind me of of all the things that we do, because memory plays tricks on you, and as decades go by, you forget many of the details. I remember one which was fascinating, which was about in the 1920s or 30s, a huge house party, and the great actress Patience Collier was in it, and Jeremy Child, all kinds of people were in it, Davy Kay, and there was something about the I can't remember what it was, but it was money which was due to be somewhere and was somewhere else or something. I can't remember. But Sapphire and Steel appeared at that, and they had to try to adapt themselves, rather unsuccessfully. Sapphire tried to adapt better, but she had no idea of what clothes were, which is why her clothes were always slightly strange. They were always blue, but they were always a bit odd, as though she'd made them up or got them out of a dressing up box. Sometimes she had a Chinese mandarin collar with a satin suit. Sometimes she'd have once I had a lovely blue Bruce Oldfield dress with paler blue baubles on it. I seem to remember a wrap-over dress with sort of gauze hanging off it. Very odd things. But in this, she had her hair all short and shingled and was wearing little black things because she was trying to fit in with that sort of house party. They were fascinating things. Do you know, I think I'd rather love them to be remade using P.J. Hammond's scripts, but maybe making them slightly differently. It'd be quite interesting to see if they would work.
Yeah, I mean, a few years ago there was definitely talk of a remake. The chap that makes Luther wrote a pilot, I think, potentially for it, but I don't think it went any further. So if anybody's watching now, we'd love them to be remade, please, and we'd love to see Joanna in them, obviously. So fingers crossed. You've mentioned a few of the actors there that were in the show alongside yourselves, but Andrew on Facebook would like to know, I'd like to ask your memories of working with David Collings as Silva.
Well, we just adored him. We were so thrilled and so lucky to have him. He's a great Shakespearean actor, a fine actor in any way. Everything you'll see him in, he's superb. He's got a quality of wry amusement, and he's got a disdainful quality, and I think he slightly looked down on Sapphire and Steel. I think he quite liked Sapphire. I think he thought Steel was a bit of a nerd, and he was very light on his feet. Collings himself was just an enchanting man, and he's gone from us now, but luckily I'm always in touch with his widow, Karen, He was adorable. We loved him. We'd love to have had him in more, and I think he would have liked to have been in more. But we just had to fit in with the real storylines and how they were written. I remember him with such affection and such admiration.
Do you still keep in touch with David McCallum?
Every Christmas. It gets slightly, I mean, we write Christmas cards, and the extraordinary thing is that he had 2 children, both looking a bit David McCallum-ish, and they went on to have children. And I think practically all the children were boys. And guess what? He's got something like 6 grandsons who all look exactly like tiny David McCallums with blonde, straight hair. It's absolutely uncanny. I know this because they're Christmas cards to me. We always exchange Christmas cards. Come with an ever-increasing tribe of tiny McCallums. One day they'll take over the world. I hope they do.
I can't wait to see them take over the world, that Ilya Karakin kind of way. It'd be great. We've got a couple more questions to talk about Sapphire and Steel, and then we've got some questions about more recent work. So Nikki on Facebook would like to know, what do you think the secret of Sapphire and Steel's longevity is? So many of us watched it as children and remember the series so clearly and so fondly. I really hope that that's yourself, knows how important you were as part of our childhoods. I think it's a sentiment that a lot of people have shared when asking these questions. But what do you think is the secret of the longevity of the show?
Maybe, well, it's always in the skill of the writing. If something is well written, rather like, for instance, much later, Absolutely Fabulous, if something is well written, it'll last. I think the fact that it didn't seem to have a time. Remember, we were dipping in and out of different periods, Victorian periods, First World War, in the 20s, sort of semi-futuristic. We were in and out. We ourselves had no time. There was no time to Sapphire and Steel. You didn't know where they came from or what their real ages were or what their real home life was like or what they looked like when they hadn't taken on human form. So it had an otherworldly quality that I think has lasted, because it hasn't dated it too much. I wonder if that's some sort of answer. Also, I think there's something huge about the problems that were inflicted on Sapphire and Steel to solve. And those are things that still worry us and trouble us and frighten us today. And so those were good things. It wasn't as though it was about a particular political period of time or anything like that. They were age-old problems and dilemmas. And these 2 kind and rather slightly humorless, I rather loved it. They didn't quite understand human humor. I mean, they weren't quite Dr. Spock, but they had an otherworldly quality, which I think for fairy tales, which is this, they really were.
I think you're quite right about saying it is a lot to do with the writers and their the way that they are in the project, because you talked about Absolutely Fabulous, and obviously Jennifer was the writer or one of the writers, but she was a key part to that whole process of making it. So you must have worked with some amazing people. I mean, you've mentioned Jennifer in the past. You mentioned Ruby Wax, and we've mentioned PJ for Sapphire and Steel. Who would you say has influenced you the most during your time in your career?
This is so hard because you learn so much from every single thing you do. That immediately brought to mind working in a play with the great playwright Alan Ayckbourn, who is one of the geniuses, still alive, thank God, who writes 2 plays a year of such unbelievable quality. And I was lucky enough to be in one, which was a sort of 2-nighter. So I had part 1 on one night, part 2 on Tuesday night, then both of them on Wednesday, both of them on Saturday. And he directed it as well as having written it. And he knew exactly how every single line should sound. And that's quite something, because you can't take it and make it your own, because you can see him sitting there slightly mouthing it with you. And you never ask, because rather like Harold Pinter, he has written it so precisely that if you say exactly how he wrote it, you'll get the pattern, you'll understand the character, you'll understand all about it. So I've always relied and admired most the writer above all, above the actors and above the directors and the production values, is the writer. Because if the writer's good, then you're standing on the highest platform, and from there you can reach the stars. Working with actors, I had the great privilege of working with Martin Scorsese and Leonardo DiCaprio in The Wolf of Wall Street. And I was slightly scared because I thought DiCaprio might He's so very good. And I wanted him to be nice because I admired him very much, all his acting, everything he's done. I think he's a truly magnificent actor. I was afraid he might be a bit of a Hollywood brat. I was so wrong. He was absolutely charming, courteous, self-effacing, humble, good-natured. He was happy to work like an actor. We just had 2-hander scenes, just him and me. And he would rehearse like any actor would, find his marks. Mr. Scorsese, who was a complete darling. I mean, talk about giants when you meet them. This tiny man with his heavy horn-rimmed glasses and his eager, alive face, and so friendly and so encouraging, so delighted. Those were extraordinary people. There was a courtesy and a freedom there. And again, working with Americans, you learn they don't waffle. They like you to come along with an idea of how you're going to play something and play it. And they'll say if they don't want it like that. So that was great. But working here in England with just fine and marvellous actors, doing the Avengers with Patrick Macnee, Gareth Hunt. But Patrick Macnee, who'd been in so many films, understood from the beginning how films work. And all the films I've done, you learn all the different, you learn from cameramen. I love people behind. I love costume designers because you know how to sit or how to look and how to be in a close-up like this, how different it is, how little you have to do with your eyes or to look away to think. Whereas if you're at the back of a stage in a theatre, you can't just do that because people won't see it. So in some way, if you're showing a different attitude or a new thought, you don't just do that. You have to go like that, because then people will go, oh, she's thought of something else. So all these are little tricks. It's kind of technique, but it's more than that. It's learning the skill of how to present yourself on radio when you've only got your voice. That goes for audiobooks as well. On screen, in comedy, in tragedy. And the great Anthony Hopkins, who just yesterday has got his second and most deserved Oscar. Do nothing, do less and less and less. Rely on the words, rely on the camera and the direction, and people will come to you. The more you do, the more people can look away from you. But if you do nothing and are very still, and remember not to be boring, somebody said, some giant said to somebody who passed it on to me, never let the camera see you not thinking. So even if you're out of focus and slightly in the background, never just go into a vacant stare while the other actor's talking. Listen, dwell, don't steal the scene, don't start fidgeting or doing things like that which would catch the attention. But be focused, have your eyes, remember things, think of things. Fascinating. So all my life I've been influenced by every second person I've worked with. Small parts as well as big parts. Important people as well as people whose names you'll never know.
Some amazing names that you've just mentioned there. I mean, I could watch Anthony Hopkins open a crisp packet. The man is just an amazing actor to watch, and I couldn't put a reason behind it, but I could just watch him forever. And just think, if you had married Ken Barlow, then it would have been a completely different story. You may not have worked with Akeborn and Leonardo DiCaprio and all those different people.
The funniest thing, and I saw Ken again this year. And he said, but you are Mrs. Barlow, aren't you? And the extraordinary thing is that because I'm married to the musician Stephen Barlow, my name is at last Joanna Barlow.
Brilliant. You have become Mrs. Barlow. A Mr. Barlow asked you and you said yes. That's brilliant. I've got one final question on Sapphire and Steel. So Elise on Facebook would like to know, what did you know about science fiction before being cast as Sapphire in Sapphire and Steel?
I didn't think very much. When I was little, there was a boys' magazine called The Eagle, and its lead cartoon story on the front page was Dan Dare, who was a spaceman. And there was a character called the Mekon, who was so brainy, he was just turned into a head and he was carried about on a kind of plate. He didn't need legs or arms anymore. And it was that kind of freakish science fiction. I think I knew, like everybody, of, rockets and people wearing silver clothes and eating just a pill, not having to eat food, and floating in space. And science fiction was always to do with sort of space. and weird animals which could kind of do stuff. I mean, it didn't make up an enormous part of my childhood, except, of course, it drifted in. I don't think it was anything like the passion and the expertise shown towards science fiction today. I think it was always rather dismissed. You know, the day of the Triffids, huge plants will come and eat you up, num, num, num. And you kind of, people put it aside as tosh. Well, the science fiction that's being done nowadays is so superior, so sophisticated, so believable, that I think it's just remarkable. I can remember going to Star Wars the very first time it came out. And as the credits were rolling, the front credits, and it was beginning, and that music was beginning, the spaceship, I think, came over your head. I hope I'm not dreaming this. It came over your head in the screen, and the screen was taken up by the sheer immensity of this colossal space station. And I can remember thinking, things have moved on. We always thought of sort of Sputniks and the things that were going about when I was young, which were small things being fired up into space, which are tiny, and maybe a man could cram into it. We never thought of entire sort of cities floating around up there. Thrilling stuff, thrilling stuff.
Thank you so much for giving me the moment of my life, which is you talking about Star Wars, because I'm a massive Star Wars fan, I'm afraid. And for me, it was the Star Destroyer, you're quite right, coming over, chasing the Tantive, the first thing on Star Wars. Goosebumps, and I, you know, it was in a great moment. So sorry, I'm geeking out. We're talking about British science fiction during this festival, and probably one of the biggest British science fiction franchises is Doctor Who. So Peter on Facebook would like to know, you played the Doctor in a brilliant comic relief special, but have you ever considered playing Doctor Who, please, in the actual show? Or maybe you would prefer to play Missy, who's the female master, and would that appeal to you more?
First of all, I was thrilled, even though it was just comic relief, and even though it was such a joke. I seem to remember that Rowan Atkinson turned into Hugh Grant, who turned into me. The Doctor was morphing or changing pretty damn fast, and it ended up as me. So I was, in a way, the first female Doctor. Quite often the papers, rather like when they're looking for a new James Bond, and everybody puts out 1,000 names, and then they say, we've got money on so-and-so, or we'd like it to be so-and-so. And it ends up not being that person at all. Every time they were looking for a new Doctor Who, they'd go, oh, and Joanna Lumley's in the running for this. I've never been approached to be Doctor Who. I would have jumped at it. Of course I would. Nobody in their right minds would have turned that down. And if they came to me now, I think I couldn't be the Doctor, because now she's made such a grand job of it, Jodie. But I think I might love to be Missy. That might be pretty good.
I think you'd be a fabulous Missy. I think you could bring so much to that role. So Glyn on Facebook would like to know, during your travel series, which are excellent, by the way, that's Glyn's comment, is there any one moment that stands out, the one that you most remember as being scary or awesome? I always remember the guards on the train asking for your documents. This
was on the Trans-Siberian Railway. We'd crossed over from China into Mongolia and from Mongolia into Russia. And our producer at the time, first of all, there was no filming on the trains unless we had exact permits to do that sort of thing. And on the Russian trains, I think it was very difficult to film. He decided to set up little GoPros, which are those tiny cameras the size of a button that you can fix all over the place. He had one on his chest, literally on his shirt button there. And it was fatal because, of course, the guards eventually said, I think you have camera in here. And I played a bit dumb and said, oh, I don't know, the boys might have fixed something up. I'm just the presenter. I'm really thick. I don't know anything. And so they said, take camera down. They took it down. And then our producer was there. And they were saying to him, when they said to him, speak Russian, you're in Russian now. It looked as though they were speaking to me. They weren't. They were speaking to him. And he was cheeking them back and being sort of saying, oh, surely we can do a little bit of England. They were getting crosser and crosser with him. But of course, it looked as though it was against me. So I wasn't afraid of that. But I do know that you're a fool if you think you can go to another country and get away with being kidding around and things like that. It doesn't work in Russia. It doesn't work in America. You don't walk into an airline place, you know, a huge airport like JFK, and start saying, oh, I've got a bomb in my bag. Don't be stupid, because you'll be locked up. If you say that, they will pounce on you, they will take you in, they'll lock you up. They won't see it as a joke. It wasn't a joke. And just like in Russia, filming on the train, it was not allowed. and they were quite strict about it. I wasn't scared then. I've only been a bit unnerved once or twice. Funnily enough, in the middle of Africa, we were filming a rhino sanctuary, and there was a massive mother rhino with a vast big horn and her little fat baby called Auguste. And the gorgeous African guard said very quietly, he said very quietly, we go, her name is Ella. And we go, Ella, Ella, don't go close to Ella. Stand here, don't go close. And Auguste must stay there. But Auguste was a cheeky little baby, and they are the most adorable creatures, very inquisitive. And so Auguste came running towards us, and Ella turned around with her great big horn. We were going, shush, go back, Auguste, go back, Auguste. And she came lumbering towards us like this with a horn. And I can remember thinking, this is a little bit scary, because she wants to protect her baby, and we're all here with cameras, and there's no tree to climb, and I'm walking backwards quite smoothly and quietly, going, there, Ella. Anyway, we got away from that, but I don't believe in spooking wild animals. They're almost as frightening as human beings, but not as malicious.
Yeah, and you're in their territory, so and if you've got a baby and it's a mother, they're protecting, so yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, quite frightening. I mean, you've done some amazing travel programs. The Trans-Siberian is just one. You've travelled the Nile, you've been to Japan, you've done the Silk routes, and obviously Girl Friday. I mean, who can forget the making a pair of sandals with your bra? I mean, if I made them, it'd be galoshes, so... That was fantastic. And I think you did that before we had this sort of celebrity island. Yeah, it must have been quite difficult to make at the time.
Well, I tell you what, it was the real prototype, because after that, they never did anything quite as tough as that. I mean, I think Bear Grylls is tough on people. But I was alone, and they said, oh, I think you would... I said, I'd like to try to do this properly. I mean, I don't want to cheat and have sort of secret sandwiches given to me or anything. So let me try to do it as well as I can. And they said, OK, we've got your little island, there's fresh water and there's fruit and everything, so you can exist. And I thought, that's fine. I'm a vegetarian, so this will be fine. There was no fruit on the island. A late monsoon had knocked all the fruit down. There was nothing on the island except some limes, which saved my life. There was no fresh water on the island, but thanks to the late monsoon, there was water dripping off rocks, so I could collect it in my bottle and purify it. It was the toughest. It was only 9 days, but it was as tough as all get out. I had no toothpaste, no soap. I had no books to read. I had nothing to listen to. I had nothing. For rice, I had a little tiny handful, that much rice a day to eat. That's all. So I got quite sort of scrawny and thin. All I thought about was finding wood to burn up, make into a little fire, my little rusty tin, cook my little bit of rice in purified water. And I loved it with all my heart. Isn't that funny? I loved it with all my heart because I could get back all my own senses, because the crew didn't live with me on the island. They lived on a boat about a mile out to sea, came onto the island every morning and left when the sun went down at 6:30 every evening, left me alone there with no light. It was pretty fascinating. Anyway, nobody ever did it as tough as that again. The other boys who did it, I think it was Lenny Henry, I think Billy Connolly did it. I think, I can't remember who else, somebody else did. They were given all kinds of nice things. They said, we want something to listen to. We want a nice sheet to wrap ourselves up in. Well, I can't do that without something to drink and eat. So they had a much easier time than I did, but I wouldn't have given it up for the world. And to talk about necessity being the mother of invention, to have created from my insoles and my bra a little pair of espadrilles is the finest thing I've done in my life. I tell you that.
Yeah, I have heard you saying that you would like, that's the only item you wish to be buried with, your little espadrilles that you made.
I know, because I thought if you have to walk around heaven, I'd like to have some little shoes on. Since then, I've got rather depressed about burning them, and I thought I'd leave them to my granddaughters instead. So I've decided to rewrite my will and leave them with all the other little things, my shells that I made into a necklace, and my little coconut scoop I made for dipping stuff in. I thought I'd leave that as my little Sarabangina bundle of things for Alice and Emily, my granddaughters.
A lovely legacy. I think that's fantastic, and the story behind it is brilliant. A few more questions. So Tamsin on Instagram would like to know, A Queen for All Seasons is coming out later in the year, but was this a passion project, and what was it like to work on? Maybe you'd like to explain a little for anybody that's not aware of what it is.
First of all, I'd like to say that I am still working on it. It doesn't have to be handed in until the end of this month, so there's still work to be done. And what it is that, in a way, it's a passion project, but it wasn't my idea. Hodder and Stoughton, the great publishers, said, we want you to do this book, but you will not be writing it. You'll be writing the foreword and the afterword and doing all the linking bits. But we want you to put together everybody else's words. So these are words from one of the Queen's ladies in waiting, from the governor of Ontario, from somebody who saw her in the street, from somebody who had once painted her, from people who looked after her animals, all kinds of people's views. So it's like a gorgeous collection of other people's encounters with the Queen. We've got what Cliff Richard writing to say what it was like getting a knighthood, all those sorts of things. And I've gathered it together like a lovely assembly of, so instead of like a scrapbook where you'd look at photographs, this is like looking at glimpses of the Queen as other people saw her. Absolutely fascinating. And of course, the Queen's own speeches, some of them wrapped into that, some of her Christmas speeches, some of her bigger speeches, what she was like from people who met her. And I've just adored doing it. I'm still doing it at the moment. And we've asked people to send in their own anecdotes, because I'd love to include other people's, I was standing in the rain, and when we went by, the Queen waved and smiled and she was wearing a blue dress, or something, anything people want to do, to write in, because when they've got a special moment with the Queen is somebody really different. Movie stars are great, and we always remember when some rock star, turned around and caught my eye, and you go, oh, I know Billy Fury was looking at me, or whatever, those sorts of things, that Elvis moment. Well, the Queen is Elvis moment times 10, and people who meet her become dumbfounded, overwhelmed, overexcited, children giving her flowers burst into tears. Quite grown-up people become tongue-tied and can't think of the right word to say. And it must be quite extraordinary being her in the middle of all of that. So it's been a heavenly book, because I just adore the Queen, actually, like everybody. I simply adore her. I've had the great luck to meet her once or twice. Anyway, so this is what it is. It's a Queen for all seasons. It's about the Queen. It's not a history. It's not going doggedly through her life. It's not about everything she's done. It's literally glimpses of the Queen gathered into a great big bouquet for Her Majesty on the 70th anniversary of being Queen, which is exceptional.
I love that idea of it being a bouquet. I mean, I loved your book where you had all your photographs, so you had that sort of, it was almost like a scrapbook of your life, and I thought that was a fascinating and a great visual way to see that story.
Thank you.
David on Instagram would like to know, you have the most phenomenal voice, and I've listened to audiobooks I would never have read because of your voice. How do you choose the books that you will read, as I imagine you must get asked to do a lot?
I'm not asked to do as many as I'd like to do. I love doing audiobooks. The only thing is they usually take a proper unexpurgated book, which might be that long, for instance, can take 2 days to do. And unless you've got 2 consecutive days to do it, and of course, Stephen Fry doing Harry Potter, far longer than that. But unless you have a really good little chunk of time that you can be free, it's very difficult to do. I always say yes to audiobooks. There's practically nothing I've turned down. I did one during lockdown, a wonderful one by a man called Christopher Lloyd, and it's just like a children's encyclopedia with all the difference. And so I do the audio voice of it. So as you turn the pages, you could read it, but it's also my voice reading it. So it's good for teaching children to read, but it's an encyclopedic book of everything that's happening in the space and on the earth and before time and the planet. So very, very good there. So that's the last one I did, and I just adored doing that.
As part of the festival, we spoke to Alex Kingston for her part in Doctor Who, and she was saying that during lockdown she had been recording for Big Finish Audio, and she'd made herself a little studio at home, but she had to use anything that she had, so she ended up using reindeer hides and chairs from her kitchen. And she said that on one day she recorded it, and it was so hot in the house that she had to record in her bra and pants. Which was a lovely visual. It just really humanised her. It made you realise that, we're all exactly the same. We all get the job done at the end of the day. Maybe under a canopy of reindeer hides is one
Typical Alex, I might say, because most of us would say duvet. Only Alex Kingston would have reindeer hide.
She was brilliant. It was great to chat to her. So I've just got 3 more questions that have been submitted in advance. So Beth on Twitter would like to know, how much of Patsy is really you? Did Jennifer give you guidelines, or did Patsy evolve to be such an iconic and wonderful character?
Well, Jennifer wrote it, and originally Patsy wasn't quite as extreme. She was just a friend of Eddie's, and there wasn't really any guidance of how to play her. And I had an idea of how I wanted to do her. And as I wasn't getting much guidance, I mean, nobody had said this is how we'd like her to be, I thought that if I put her hair up immediately and put on very red lips and always have red lips and have a cigarette, I knew that somehow once that character had arrived, that she would be able to do anything. And luckily that character made Jennifer laugh. And so Jennifer began to write to that beastly, ghastly, unbelievably funny and almost a cartoon character. She'd had all her organs removed because she'd so abused them. She hadn't eaten anything since 1974. I mean, she's a cartoon character. She could talk about gender fluid. She could switch over into being a man and take hormones, even grow a small moustache and beard, as she did and appeared in something, then gradually lost interest in that and sort of went back to being a woman again. So a cartoon character and absolute heaven. So not a lot of me in that, but the bits that were me were the bits that Patsy had been a model. And I said, can she have been a model? Because I was a model in the 60s and I know exactly what it was like. And so Patsy knew rock and roll stars. I knew some, but Patsy and Majesty knew them all. And I'd slept on them all. Patsy had done things that I'd done, but to far, far greater extent. I smoke a little bit. Patsy chain smokes. I drink a bit. Patsy just is made of alcohol. So the whole thing was just extreme and honestly the best fun. I loved that, funnily enough, as much as I loved Purdey and Sapphire. Those were the 3 outstanding and very, very different characters I've played in my happy career.
Yeah, Patsy, it was always the scene that Patsy went to bed and she puts an unlit cigarette in her mouth and has a lighter in her hand, and as she wakes up in the morning...
So she's not a moment with pure oxygen in her, just get it.
It was just those tiny little things, those thought processes that just was the icing on the cake. She was an amazing character. I think the whole show was brilliantly done, and I think all of the cast really brought, June Whip. You had all the J's, it was
all the J's.
Just brilliant, absolutely well done. Sorry, that sounded awfully patronising. Well done.
Thank you. Thanks.
Here, have this award. Well done. So Isla on Instagram would like to know, I thought you were brilliant as Purdey. So we've mentioned Patsy, we've mentioned Sapphire, but Purdey, I demanded an immediate short haircut that my parents were not happy about. Did you like playing her as a character?
I loved her. I had quite a battle to get her to be like that. And I don't know what made me brave enough. For a start, they'd called her Charlie. And I said, well, there's Charlie's Angels. And also there was a perfume at the time called Charlie, woman walking along with a bag going, Charlie. And I said, well, let's get another name. And Purdey is the name of a very good shotgun in Mayfair. They've got their shop there, and it's a brilliant shotgun. I thought that was a good surname. And she could just have one name. We never knew her other names. She didn't have other names. Also, the hair. When I got the part, my hair was maybe the length it is now and brown. And I said, I want to cut it short and just have it no-nonsense, short hair. And they found it furious. They said, there are no heroines with short hair. You can't be a girl heroine and have short hair. This is terrible. And so I said, well, if I will, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it anyway. So the great John Frieda cut it. And the boy holding the Kirby grip standing beside him, lovely boy with red hair, Nicky Clark. So this began all their careers as well. And so they went snip, snip, snip and gave me just this lovely, heavy, heavy fringe. And then sort of, it was supposed to look a bit like that, like almost like a boy, like a little boy's haircut. Sometimes it grew a bit longer and then it looked a bit like a squashed mushroom on my head. And sometimes hairdressers did other people's hair very badly. But it had a lovely chic look to it. And it became quite a style because it came at exactly the same time as now, which is that everybody had long hair. Everybody just had long hair, which just was sort of in the middle and went down. And I think sometimes people thought, I'm getting a bit bored with my long hair. I could like to look a little bit different. And so when they cut it, going, oh, I'm being so brave, I'm cutting my hair. They pretty much loved it. In Holland, I went over to do some promotion in Holland. And I think it was compulsory in Holland because grannies, babies, middle-aged women, everybody had it. Lovely.
She was a great character, and I think she was one of those. It's a terrible word, isn't it? She had spunk.
You're right. She was gutsy, and she wasn't soppy. She didn't really fall for Gambit. I think she was quite soft-hearted about him, but she never succumbed to anything. She never really had boyfriends. She was a tough little agent, that one. I liked her.
My grandfather was a gamekeeper, so the moment he heard the word Purdey, he'd just stand there and go, "It was a gun! She's a gun!" Right, so our final question, and I think it's a lovely one. So Vashna on Instagram would like to know, you produce your own shows now, so what show would you like to make if you could make anything, or have you already made it?
You've never made the show you want to make. You're always dreaming about something to make in the future. And although I am credited as a producer on these shows that I do, principally the travel shows, with Clive Tullow, we think things up together, but all the legwork, all the putting together, which is an enormous job for producers, they sort of do it. I was a co-producer with the great Verity Lambert, who's no longer with us, on a drama series called The Caslets. But really, what I like best of all is being on this side of the camera and taking people with me. I love doing documentaries. So I love doing documentaries, and we're always longing for the next one. And the one we're just about to do this autumn, inshallah and fingers crossed, is the spice route right from New Guinea virtually all across Indonesia and Mauritius to the coast of Africa and up into Egypt. So we hope that we're going to be doing that. But as an actress, you're just thrilled every time somebody phones up and says, your agent says, they've got a part you'd like you to look at. And your heart goes, oh, boom, I wonder if this will be the one. Quite a lot of work you have to turn down. Either you've done it before, it doesn't fit in with your timetable, or you simply don't like it. But when that one does come along, you never know what it's going to be. It can be a small part. If it's properly written, back to the writing again, if it's beautifully written and you know you could do something with it, most important, gosh, you grab it. It's like grabbing, I don't know what, new mown grass. It's magic.
Inshallah, indeed. And if you need anybody to carry your bags on the spice route, I'm more than happy to come along. It sounds like a fabulous journey. Yeah, I mean, I love that you interviewed and spent time with will.i.am, and I think that was a fascinating programme just because you were very inquisitive and very natural, and I loved that we found out more that way, I think, in the way that you presented the show. It was a really good show. So thank you for that.
Well, I'm touched by that. I love will.i.am, and I love and admire his work. I don't know nearly enough of it because I'm married to a classical musician, which means we don't have as much modern music as I'd like. But the truth is that Will was just a darling, extraordinary, exceptional man. And it was rather nice, I think, that I was not a geek, because geeks would have gone straight into absolutely homing in on the exact music thing. But having a sort of wandering grandmother like me made it quite a different kind of combination. And it was the best fun ever. It was lovely to see him both in California and over here at his show in London. I loved it. I love him.
It was brilliant. I wish my grandma would buy me things from Vivienne Westwood. That was a fantastic gift. Yeah, we just happen to have his sizes here on file. So, yeah.
That's lovely.
Well, Joanna, it's been fantastic speaking with you. You've answered all of the questions, which I never thought we'd be able to do. So I'm sure you've made a lot of people very happy. Is there anything else that we have to look forward to coming up next? Are you working on any other projects, or should we just look out for the Spice Trails and keep everything crossed for that one?
I think keep fingers crossed for Spice Trails. I've been given a kind of, maybe there's a kind of rustling in the bushes. We did a show which came out this year called Finding Alice, and I think that might come back for a second series. I think there are all those sorts of things which, until this devilish pandemic settles down and disappears, it's quite hard to know what the future holds. But the future, as they would say, the future is bright, even if it's not orange for me. The future is bright. And all things are good. We've got to remember not to be depressed. I think the only message I would leave with everybody is have a good heart, be strong, be bold, be bright, look to the horizon. Everything is going to get better. Be brave.
The future's bright, the future's sapphire. Thank you so much for your time. It's been fantastic speaking with you, and I'm sure you have made a lot of people very happy. So thank you very much on behalf of the National Space Centre and Brit Sci-Fi. Thank you, Joanna.
Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for joining us. Don't forget, lots of things for you to see throughout this festival. And once again, a huge thank you on behalf of everybody for Joanna and her time. Thank you.